Okay, so we're going to start with Chapter 3, Lesson 1, Absolute Value and Integers. I know we're not in the beginning of the book, and that's okay. Like I said before, the book goes in a goofy order, and I don't really like it. And so I'm just going to do, in this book, I'm going to do Chapters 3, Chapter 4, and then go back to 1 and 2, okay? So Mr. Kernizl already came in here and said, what, you're in Chapter 3 already? I said, no. We're just starting in Chapter 3. So bell ringer, where do you see negative numbers? Where's somewhere you see negative numbers? Cadence. On a number line. Okay. Where's another place, Henry? Bank accounts. My gosh, is that a bad sign if we get negative numbers in our bank account? That's a bad sign. Zane? Football game. Yeah, okay. Or I'm going to take that a step further and I'm going to say, like somebody loses yards in a football game, like, oh, the quarterback got sacked, they lost like 6 yards. So you see a -6. Yep. Okay. Where else do you see negative numbers? Merrick? Math book? Okay. In real life, though? Yeah. In the stocks? Yep. Yep. A lot of times if they lose points for the day, you'll see negative numbers. Anybody else? Does anybody like watch the weather? Love weather? Everybody, yeah. Think about negative number. Well, how do you see negative numbers in weather? Degrees. If it's like -10 out, should you go outside probably? No, it's a little chilly. Okay. I'm going to refer to weather a lot when we talk about negative numbers because I feel like that's somewhere where you understand them. You can understand negative numbers because you know that if it's a negative degree, it's super cold, right? What's colder, -10 or -5? -10. -10 is colder. Okay, no, that's okay because we're going to come talk about that. We're going to talk about that today. Okay, so first thing you need to write down for me, if I can get this thing to move. I don't know why this thing is, I'll just do this. Okay, so positive numbers. This is your first vocabulary word. Okay, positive numbers are obviously greater than 0. Negative numbers are less than 0 and have a minus sign in the front. Now, do you have to write down everything that I have up here word for word? No. But I want you to write it down how you can understand it. So don't think you have to do it word for word like I have it up here. And if it's something you know already, you don't need to write it down. Like, you all know positive numbers are greater than 0. So if there's something out there that you already know and you're like, okay, I'm not going to write that, you don't need to write it. That's fine. Oh yeah, I see Jacob getting his highlighter out. He's going to highlight his vocab. Whatever you need to do. All right. All right, so before you write anything, let's just talk about this, okay? So I'm going to talk about the number line. I think Cadence, who said the number line? Cadence, I think it was you. Okay, I have a number line up here. And let's just look at that together. Do you notice how up here in my number line, all my negatives are in red? Have you ever heard the term in the red before? Like if you, no, you haven't? Like a lot of times if people like talk about their bank accounts, and they say, oh, your bank account's in the red, that means you're negative. Okay, so if That's a term you might hear someday. Everything in black over there is positive, just so you know. The 0 is not any of those colors because it's neither positive or negative. Okay, so that's why it's not any of those colors. It's neither positive or negative. And that's why I have this up here. A lot of times negatives you'll see red. You don't need to write this down if you don't want to. But yeah, positives a lot of times will be in yellow. Okay, so even though those are in black up there, a lot of times positives will be yellow. Okay, and opposites. This is another vocabulary word you should probably know. Okay, so they're the same distance. The opposites are the same distance from 0. And then I have an example down here, and we'll talk about this example in a second. So opposites are the same distance from 0. And most likely you kind of know this already. So like my example, I have -2 and 2 are opposites. They're the exact same distance from 0 on the number line. So if I ask you, what's the opposite of -9? What would you say? 9. If I ask you, what's the opposite of 100? What would you say? -100. See how opposites are very simple? A lot of times we forget. It's just a simple concept you forget. If I asked you what the opposite of -12.5 is, what would you say? 12.5. Okay, so does that make sense to everybody? Anybody have questions on an opposite? That's pretty easy. Some of you are writing, some of you are highlighting. Take your time. Okay, let's see. All right, so integers. This is probably one of the biggest vocabulary words you need to know. An integer. Okay? An integer is a whole number and its opposites. So an integer is a positive or negative whole number. A positive and negative whole number. And I want you to also make sure you get that in there. Positive. Oh my gosh. Wow, look at this. Think it's off a little bit? Let's try that again. Oh my gosh, look at that. I think I'm going to have to do that again. Oh well. Positive or negative whole number. So basically, it's any whole number. Whether it's positive or negative doesn't matter. A lot of time, people think integers are just positive. That's not true. They're also negative. They're also negative. I'm going to ask you what this is tomorrow, so I hope you remember. Integer is a positive and negative whole number. Oops. All right, you ready? Yeah, Kaden. Sure, yeah, opposites. Well, basically, an opposite is just a number that is the same distance on the other side as well. Okay, so an integer can be anything. An integer could have an opposite, it could not. So like I say, what's an integer up there? What's an integer? Somebody tell me one. What's an integer? Pick a number. What? 1. 1's an integer. What's 1's opposite? Okay, so an integer can just be any number up there. An opposite would be what I would say, well, what's the opposite of it? And you would tell me the other one, okay? And you got to remember this number line. You got to pretend it goes past 20. I just only had space for 20 on either side, okay? So don't think it stops there. It keeps going forever. All right, so let's talk more about integers, okay? You don't got to write this down, but let's just talk about them, okay? So what some of these are integers? Half, is this an integer? Why is this not an integer, Ryan? It's not a whole number. Integer? Yeah. What is that goofy looking thing? Pi, is that an integer? Why not? It's a decimal, 3.1459, yada, 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 yada. Oh, the whole pi. Anybody? No? Doesn't Mitchell or Jeff? Both of them know the whole pi? Well, a few of the letter, few of them. That's good. You don't need to know any more than that. Integer? Yes. Whole number. Yes. Yes. Okay, so you know what an integer is? Positive and negative. Got to remember that. And negative. Very good. Nice job. All right, so absolute value. Absolute value. This is a lot like an opposite again. Okay? Absolute value. You're going to see this. You know where you're going to see this? STAR test, Iowa assessments, all that good stuff, your next test. Okay, so absolute value. This is probably one of the easiest things in math, but a lot of people forget what it is. Anybody remember talking about this last year? Did you talk about it last year? Good. Absolute value. It's the actual distance from 0. And it has a symbol, just 2 lines. You don't need to write any of this in your notebook. We'll come to that in a second. All you need to do is write some of this right now. Absolute value, the actual distance from 0. And it's got a symbol, 2 lines. Okay, so this is what you're going to see. It's going to look something like this. And what that says is, what is the absolute value of negative 2? Okay, so what it means is, how many spaces is negative 2 from 0? Well, how many spaces is negative 2 from 0? Just 2, right? Like, because if I look, I have 1, 2. That's my answer. Is it negative? No, I'm just asking you how many spaces. That's all I'm asking you. Okay? An answer to an absolute value problem is never negative. It's never negative because I'm just asking you how many spaces it is from something. Okay? So let's go to the next one here. So let's talk about this one. Absolute value of negative 8. 8, because that's 8 spaces from 0, right? What about the absolute value of 9? Just 9. Is it negative? No, I'm just asking how many spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9. That's all I'm asking. Absolute value of negative 17? Just 17, right? 90. Is it okay if you have a decimal in there? Yes, it's okay. That's all right. But is it an integer? No, it's not an integer. Oh, what about this? What's happening? What? I got to multiply, but first thing I need to do, I need to do my absolute value first. Do that first. So what's the absolute value of negative 5? 5, okay. What's the absolute value of negative 3? So I would take 5 times 3, 15. Difficult? No, not at all. Not at all. Do you have questions on this? Does anybody have a question? No? All right. Stop me if you do. So the next thing we're going to do, and you really don't need to write this down, you just need to watch. Okay? So they're going to ask you to write an integer based on what's happening. And it's kind of like what we talked about with like losing yards in football. Okay, that's exactly what's happening here. So if I say I lost 21 yards, what does that look like in an integer? Negative 21. Good job. And you know what? That's negative, you know what I mean. Negative 21. That's my answer. Okay. What about this one? If I earn $14, what does that look like in an integer? Plus 14. Did I earn that money? It's money in my account now. Plus 14 is what that would look like. Let's see if it will work for me. Plus 14. What about this one? 900 feet below sea level. Negative 900, because am I below? Yeah. So look for some really, really keywords. Keywords below, lost, earned, increase. What would increase be? Plus or minus? What about decrease? Minus. So watch your keywords, okay? Watch your keywords. All right. Ordering from least. There's a lot today. I don't know why. There's just a lot. But are we doing good so far? Okay. So the last thing, I believe this is the last thing. They're going to ask you to order things from least to greatest. This is where your weather comes in. Because if you know you have a really, really big negative, is it really, really cold? Yes. Okay, so let's talk about ordering things from least to greatest. Let's talk about here. 3, negative 2, 9, negative 9. What is the coldest here? I always think in temperature. What's the coldest? Negative 9, so that's my smallest one. Okay. What's my next coldest? Negative 2, and then 3, and then 9, right? Think of it in temperature. If you are not sure, think of it in temperature. What's the coldest? And I'm getting goosebumps right now because I'm thinking about cold weather. My gosh, it's getting warm in here. Okay, so think about weather. How cold is it? Let's do some more of these. Let's do this one together, and I'm going to let you do this by yourself. Okay? What's my coldest here? And I would usually write that if my smartboard was working. Okay. What's the next coldest? Then. There, you just ordered from least to greatest. Okay. Just remember, let's look at my number line again quick. The farthest you get down this way, even though there's no numbers in, the smaller number you get. Okay. The smaller it gets. If I talk about negative 100 and negative 20, what's the smaller number? Negative 1, what? Negative 100, right? Because that's the coldest. Whatever's the coldest is the absolute smallest number there is. So if I talk about, if I talk about negative 21 and negative 20, what's the smallest? Negative 21, because that's the coldest, right? Think of it in weather. If I talk about negative 8 and negative 7, what's the coldest? Okay, so here's another one. What if I talk about negative 2.5, negative 2? What's the coldest? 2.5. Very good, very good, very good. Nice job. That's really, really tricky sometimes. Make sure you're paying attention, okay? Do this yourself. Do this one in your notebook. You order that one from least to greatest for me. Done already? That wasn't hard, was it? What's the coldest, or the smallest, I guess I should say? Negative 5, then negative 0.5, and then 0. Remember, which one's colder here? This one's colder. That one's the littlest one. Oops. The smallest one, I should say. Do you have questions on that? That's easy to make mistakes on, so be careful. If you're not sure, say in your head which one's the coldest, or look up at the number line, because whichever one's farther this way is the coldest, or the smallest. And that's all I have for you today. Let's open our books and let's talk about our homework assignment, okay?